Hi, my name is Andrew Barlow. I'm the VP of Advocacy and Innovation at AppLearn, and this is a quick talk on implementation best practices for GRC technologies. The title of this session is Having Your GRC Software in Place is Just the Beginning, and we take a look at what organizations can think about when embarking on the implementations of new GRC technologies. The first thing I wanted to do was introduce AppLearn. AppLearn as an organization are specialists in digital adoption, so we focus on helping organizations adopt the technologies that they're investing in, such as new technologies that perhaps may support a global risk and compliance strategy, so GRC technologies. And really our focus is on how can we best advise our customers on adoption strategies, and how can we ensure that they get the most out of their investments in those technologies. So first of all, let's take a look at what the stats tell us. Over the next 2 years, $6 trillion will be spent on digital technology transformation, and that's according to IDC, the global transformation analysts. And we see this trend continuing to grow, continuing to show no real signs of stopping, and that is because organizations are looking at the benefits that digital technologies promise in terms of efficiency gains, return on investment, and so on. But alongside that, we see stats like this from Gartner that say that 75% of those projects will fail to deliver their intended return on investment. So we see an investment trend in organizations going out and procuring technologies to underpin their various business processes, but we're also seeing that 75% of their investments fail to deliver their intended ROI. And the big question is, why is that the case? Why are 75% of these projects failing to deliver the value originally stated in their business case? And in many regards, that is down to true adoption and engagement. And recently, a colleague shared this with me, which was a press release about 3 organizations that had recently implemented actually HR technologies in the US, and adoption of those technologies had subsequently led to a financial loss or a financial impact to the organization. And it just goes to show that that adoption truly does have an impact on the value that you get back from investments in any type of digital transformation or initiative. So the biggest thing really that I would hope that people would take from this presentation is this equation that we see on screen now. I speak to some of the largest companies in the world that are making multi-billion-dollar investments in transformation, and what I think that the leading companies really grasp quite early on really is that high adoption is inherently linked to high return on investment. So as long as you have a focus on, okay, we procure the right technology that we think is a good fit for us, we can technically implement it brilliantly, but ultimately it's the adoption of that technology that really drives high return on investment and high value back to the organization. But if adoption is the key to unlocking high return on investment, then how are organizations approaching adoption and considering adoption when relative to a transformation project? Well, our experience is telling us that businesses are only attributing 1% of their entire project budget to change management, which you think is crazy, given the statistics that we've just seen, that 75% of these projects fail to deliver their intended ROI, and that adoption is inherently linked to value. yet only 1% of transformation budgets are actually spent on change, which inherently has a big impact on adoption itself. So as you can see from this statistic, one of the reasons why businesses are failing is that they're not adequately budgeting for change relative to the technology project that they're implementing or embarking on. And what I would say about this is there are a number of reasons why businesses don't invest in change in the way that they should. One of the reasons for that is because it's one of the things that hopefully you can pull out of a business case to try to cut costs. Hopefully people will just adopt it by osmosis. But then again, that's a huge risk and can lead to the types of press releases that we saw earlier in this talk. But also, I think that organizations are not investing in the right type of change. And what we mean by that is, if you think about how we used to implement technology projects in the 80s and 90s, and even in the early 2000s, we would refer to those technologies as being on-premise. And the emergence of SaaS technologies, so software as a service or cloud technologies as they're referred to, has changed the game in terms of change management. So many businesses are still implementing traditional change management practices. And what I mean by that is, if you look at the line here that takes you to just after go live, that's like traditional change management. How do we get you from your current state to a desired state? And there are many organizations around the world trying to implement SaaS tools with this particular model. The problem with that is that SaaS technologies, by nature of their design, evolve. They are as a service. We prescribe to the fact that actually these technologies are going to grow. They're going to new features will appear and they will continue to enhance over time, and that's why we procure them as a service. The challenge that presents organizations is, how do we manage ongoing change? When the tool releases new features and functionality, how do we communicate and train around those new features and functionality? Also, businesses grow. I would say to many practitioners, the process designs that you go live with, even for a GRC technology, will not be the same processes that you will have 1 year down the line, 2 years down the line, because you will look to optimize them. So the question is, how do you communicate and train around business process improvement and enhancements to processes? And then finally, new hires. So how do you train people you've not even hired yet, because they're going to have to use these tools and embrace these tools in the future? So what is the onboarding experience like for those for those employees that are further down the line? So there are just some examples of how not only are businesses not budgeting appropriately for change management and adoption, the strategy that they're investing around change management is very traditional in nature and actually should be a lot longer term. We think that many organizations actually should create a change and adoption stream that sits alongside the life cycle of their technology project, which will allow them to not only accommodate for the initial deployment of the technology, but also manage that ongoing change into the future and really sustain the value that you get when you do change right. Moving on to the next part of best practice implementations relative to adoption. One of the biggest questions that I ask practitioners when I work with them is, what is it that colleagues truly need to adopt? So when you're implementing a new GRC technology, what is it that they need to adopt? And the biggest fail that many businesses make is they think that this is a technology play. So the first thing they think is, well, we better show everyone how to use the new tool that we've bought. And the center of attention is the technology. Interestingly, I spoke to the head of global research at IDC, Sean Fitzgerald, and he said to me that when they'd done some analysis, the leading companies that really drove high value, high return on their investments in digital transformation were those businesses that invested in technology to support a broader business strategy. So rather than buy a technology, you're actually buying a technology to support your global risk and compliance strategy, of which there are other components to consider. Which is very interesting when you then look at, well, what is it that colleagues need to adopt when you roll out a new GRC strategy and technology. So let's take a look. First of all, colleagues may need to adopt a new strategy, and this is, as an organization, you may have decided, okay, we're going to enhance, we're going to digitize our GRC strategy, we're going to roll that out across the business globally, we're going to make it more efficient, we're going to have better transparency into risk across the organization, and so on. And you need to communicate to colleagues to help them understand what our GRC strategy is, why we have it, and why it's important to the organization's health as a whole, and colleagues individually. Second of all, you may look to instill a culture, dependent on your rollout, where everybody is responsible and accountable for managing risk across the organization. And this is a cultural thing. So this is about helping people understand, that it is their responsibility and that they can make a difference. Third of all is process. So you're going to introduce new business processes within the organization, or perhaps adjustments to business processes around risk and compliance that colleagues need to understand and appreciate. So this is understanding what best practice processes look like and the adherence to those processes. So they need an element of process understanding. They also need to consider what the right behaviors are. So they need to adopt the right behaviors effectively. So are they identifying risk in the right way? Are they managing risk in the right way? Are they going to the right they're going through the right procedures and protocols that you would like them to? Do they then have the right skills to do that? So how do they identify risk? How do they perform various different tasks? So this is looking at, do the workforce have the right skills to be able to fulfill and execute your GRC strategy and processes? And then finally, can they adopt the technology that you use to underpin each of those components? So this may be, a market-leading technology like metric stream, or what other tools that you use within your organization to underpin your GRC strategy. So as you can see from this, which we refer to this as the 6 pillars of digital adoption, what you'll find is that there are multiple different facets to what colleagues need to consider. This is not just about, let's create some training on our new GRC tool and how to use it. It's about a broader consideration of all of these pillars that contribute to successful adoption and engagement. Okay, so how do we then take that step further? It's one thing acknowledging that each of these elements has an impact on successful adoption, but then how can we connect with the workforce? Well, we live in a digital world, and if you look at some statistics that we lean on quite heavily, 50%, over 50% of people that use YouTube stated that they use it to support learning needs. So if they need to learn about something, they're used to having that information very quickly and it tends to be digital in nature. It tends to be rapid access to the right information at the right time, and many organisations around the world look to harness digital forms of learning to drive the right outcomes for colleagues. And if you can make that type of content available on demand, i.e. when I need it, or as we refer to, in the flow of work. So as people are using your GRC technology, they're also learning how to use it at the same time, then that's even more powerful. So when we look at digital engagement, we think about how can you use digital content to help with strategic positioning. So digital content is a very powerful way of connecting with the workforce, helping them understand what the GRC strategy is across the organisation, why it's important to organisational health, and how people can embrace that strategy across the organisation and contribute to the end goal. Second of all, looking at cultural positioning, again in a digital format, creating content to drive an understanding of the importance that the important factor that everybody is accountable and responsible for managing risk within the organisation, identifying risks within their various different business units and the various different teams. And then also behaviourally giving people the insights that they need to understand what the behavioural expectations are of them. So, what do you expect me to do? What as a manager, perhaps, what do you expect me to do when I identify a risk? What's the protocol? What's the process that I go through in order to be able to successfully log that risk, so that the organisation can deal and manage with it in the right way? Moving on to the three other pillars, so looking at processes, skills, and software. I mentioned before about how just-in-time or on-demand content is almost an expectation of the modern consumer, really, because we're all consumers at the end of the day. And also our time is precious. So how do we grab employee mindshare? How do we find time to learn about changes to business process or skills-based learning or applications? Well, if you look at most modern applications, actually they have an element of in-application support. And what we do at AppLearn, we actually have a platform, we have a product that becomes an overlay to your technologies. And as you can see on the left-hand side there, you can actually deliver communications in screen. So you could provide in-application process assistance to help people understand why each of the processes is important and what best practice for that specific business process looks like. You can also deliver in-application skills content. So if you know that when logging risk, people need to understand how to identify risks, you might have a piece of content in there about teaching people how to identify risks across the organization and how to log them. And then finally, in-application guidance. So this is relatively new, but this allows you to actually guide people step by step through completing specific business processes. So rather than teaching them and then having them go and execute a task further down the line, you can they can learn and work at the same time. You can show them how to complete a business process or task in screen. So each of those areas really is, or each of those slides or tiles is really designed to show you how there are options out there for how you can deal with each of the 6 pillars, how within your specific deployment of a new GRC strategy and technology, you can connect with colleagues on each of these pillars and give them the right support that they need to be successful when embracing your new technology. As a business, we have a mantra internally: if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. And there are a number of different strategies that you can use to understand how you can better measure adoption. And one of the questions that I often get is, well, how do we measure adoption? What is the equation? Well, there is one thing that I can tell you for sure, and that is that adoption is not usage. Usage is one consideration, but it is not adoption. There are some other things to consider. So let's take a look. The first thing to consider is that adoption equals participation. So this is that people are actually participating. They're actually using the tool. So I said that adoption is not usage. It is not alone. Usage is one consideration. We prefer to refer to usage as participation. People are participating with the right processes in the right way, and you're getting the right level of participation. If you're rolling out your GRC technology to 5,000 colleagues, what proportion of that of colleagues do you expect to log in, to engage with specific business processes? Does the participation look good? Second of all, speed. Efficiency is important, because not only do we want people to participate with processes, we want them to be efficient in the way that they do it. We don't want their experience to be negative, nor do we want it to take more time than it needs to, because at the end of the day, we want people to be efficient in delivering these processes so that they can actually come into the application, do what they need to do, and then focus their time on other activities within the business that perhaps may be focused on their day-to-day role and their objectives. So the second thing to think about is, are colleagues efficiently engaging with the processes? And then finally, quality. Is the quality of the information that is being put into the system and the quality of their participation good, bad, or indifferent? And if you think about this, you could have somebody that participates well, but they take a long time to execute a business process, and actually the data that they add in is not very good. So if you were purely looking at adoption as participation, then actually you would be inaccurately reporting back to the organization that adoption was brilliant or what have you. So by following this equation, you can really get a grip on what adoption looks like. And our reporting capabilities that we have, not only do we advise on adoption measurement, but we also have a tool that allows you to physically create dashboards that will report on adoption in this way. So the key takeaways for this session really are that you need to make adoption a key KPI for project success. So you need to make sure that you first of all that you budget for adoption in the right way, and then that you allocate the budget accordingly across the life cycle of your deployment to make sure that you can also support future change. So that any solutions that you invest in to help, whether that be around communication, support, training, you need to make sure that they're sustainable, and that's about spreading the budget in the right way. And the second piece, really around budgeting for adoption, is ensuring that the traditional change approach is not, that the budget doesn't just completely stop there. That also you think about how it can be broader than just, for example, spent on training around how do I use this business application, and actually focused more on the broader 6 pillars of digital adoption, which we outlined earlier. So ensuring that not only do colleagues know how to transact something using your new technology, but they also appreciate the other aspects of the 6 pillars, such as, are they participating in the right way? Are they emitting the right behaviours? Do they understand what good looks like, which will affect the quality measurement, and so on. And that was a quick insight. If you'd like to see a demo of our product working in some of the technologies that can be used for GRC, to underpin GRC strategies, then you can visit our website at applearn.com. But in the meantime, I'd just like to say thank you for taking the time to listen to this talk. Thank you for your time.